Let me ask you something that sounds simple but carries a lot of weight. When was the last time you truly felt your birthday? I do not mean noticing the date or replying thank you to a few messages. I mean really feeling it the way you did as a kid. Back then, your heart used to race just thinking about balloons, cake, and having everyone's attention for one special day that felt like it belonged only to you. Now jump ahead to adult life. That same date shows up on the calendar, and somehow it passes like any other day. You wake up, maybe see a couple of notifications, maybe your mother calls, and then the day keeps moving. You tell people you do not really celebrate anymore. You say you do not care. You joke that it is just another day. But if you are honest, is it really that simple? Under that calm attitude, under that casual shrug, there is usually a quiet story. People who treat their birthday like an ordinary day are not cold or numb. They are not disconnected from feelings. A lot of the time, they are the most thoughtful ones. They are people who learned to keep their expectations low because life taught them that hoping too much can hurt. From a psychological point of view, birthdays act like emotional mirrors. They show how you feel about being alive. They show how you handle attention. They show how comfortable you are letting yourself be seen. When someone says, I do not care about my birthday, what they often mean is, I do not need approval anymore. But sometimes what they really mean is, I stopped expecting it. There is a real difference between growing mature and quietly pulling away emotionally, and birthdays have a strange way of revealing which path we took. Some people truly outgrow birthday excitement, not because they are sad, but because they feel at peace. They find meaning in regular days, in routines, in small, quiet moments. For them, happiness is not tied to one date on the calendar. Life itself feels like the celebration, but for other people, birthdays carry more weight than they let on. For them, the day can bring a soft kind of anxiety, not because of getting older, but because of memories. Maybe birthdays remind them of times they felt overlooked. Maybe they once hoped too much and felt the sting when those hopes were not met. So instead of saying, I hope someone remembers me this year, they say, it is just another day. That is protection dressed up as indifference. This is where the psychology gets interesting because it shows how the mind learns to adapt. When someone goes through emotional letdowns again and again, the brain starts lowering expectations. This is called emotional self protection. You stop anticipating too much so you do not have to feel disappointed. You train yourself not to hope too loudly. On the surface, that sounds sad, but in another way, it is a form of emotional intelligence. It is the mind trying to keep things steady. When excitement keeps leading to pain, the brain chooses stability instead. The problem is that over time, that same protection can slowly dull joy. A heart that learned to guard itself can become overly cautious. You start moving through your own life like you are visiting someone else's house. You are polite, you pay attention, but you never fully relax. Think about how many people smile and say, oh, I do not really do birthdays. Then, later that night, they replay the day in their head. They notice who did not send a message, who forgot, who stayed silent. Almost all of us do this, even the ones who say they do not care. Caring is part of being human. Even pretending not to care is still a kind of caring. It is just flipped inward, packed down, hidden behind calm behavior. Psychologists call this avoidant validation behavior. It happens when you convince yourself that you do not need recognition because a part of you is afraid it will not come. This pattern often forms in people who learned early on that their emotional needs felt like a burden. They learned that wanting less hurt less. So when you meet someone who treats their birthday like any other day, do not assume they are emotionally distant. Sometimes they have simply made peace with disappointment. They chose control over excitement. But control always comes with a price. Beneath the surface of, it is just another day, lives a deeper truth. Every one of us wants to be seen, not praised, not put on a pedestal, just seen honestly. Birthdays are powerful symbols. They mark the simple fact that you exist. One day each year that is not about accomplishments or roles or relationships, but about the fact that you are here. And for many people, that reminder brings mixed feelings. Some feel thankful. Some feel lonely. Some feel both at the same time, like a strange mix of nostalgia and detachment. That happens because birthdays remind us of time. They remind us how far we have come and how far we still feel from where we hope to be. That is the quiet psychological trigger most people miss. For some, treating their birthday like an ordinary day is a way to stay grounded. It is a way of keeping time from feeling too heavy. If I do not make a big deal out of it, they think, then it will not feel like another year slipping away. There's also a cultural shift behind all this. As children, birthdays are social landmarks. They give us a sense of belonging. But as adults, that spotlight can feel uncomfortable, even strange. A lot of adults carry a quiet struggle inside. They want to be noticed, but they do not want to look needy. That push and pull shows up in small ways, and one of the clearest places it appears is in how they treat their own birthday. Because beneath the surface, something deeper is happening. When you grow up as the responsible one, the strong one, or the person who always gives, your mind absorbs a message early on. Your happiness comes after everyone else's. You learn to minimize your needs. You tell yourself they are not that important. You become the person who remembers everyone else's birthday but barely thinks about your own. Over time, your birthday starts to feel unimportant. You are not even sure how you would react if someone planned something big for you. It feels awkward. Maybe it even feels unnecessary. But that discomfort with being celebrated is not humility. It is emotional exhaustion. Deep down, many of these people still want to feel seen, just not in a loud or flashy way. They do not want attention. They want understanding. They want someone to remember not just the date they were born, but the person they have been becoming throughout the year. That is where the paradox of emotional maturity shows up. The more self sufficient you become emotionally, the harder it feels to accept love without questioning it. So birthdays turn into neutral ground, a place where feelings might normally rise but instead get replaced with practicality. You say, "It is fine. Let us just get through the day." But behind that calm voice, your mind is sorting through a lot. There is nostalgia for the excitement you felt as a child. There is a quiet sadness for connections that faded. There is gratitude for making it through another year. And there is a gentle longing for simplicity, for the kind of joy that once came without effort. That is why this experience is so common. Even if you think you have moved past birthdays, some part of you remembers what it felt like to be celebrated freely. There is also another layer that psychologists talk about when it comes to adults and birthdays. It is called temporal self awareness. It is that moment when you look back at who you were a year ago and silently compare to who you are now. You measure the space between who you hope to be and who you actually became. Sometimes that space feels uncomfortable. That is why birthdays feel more like mirrors than parties for some people. They reflect the quiet distance between expectations and reality. And instead of facing that reflection head on, many people choose to minimize the day itself. It is not because they do not care. It is because they are thinking deeply. It is the mind saying, "Give me room to process my own timeline." So if you have ever felt strange on your birthday, like you are supposed to feel something but do not, know this. There is nothing wrong with you. You are not ungrateful. You are not disconnected. You are simply aware. You are aware that time is moving forward. You are aware that validation feels different now. You are aware that celebration means more than cake and candles. Because birthdays were never really about age, they were always about meaning. And the older we get, the more personal that meaning becomes. When I was a kid, my birthday was about the world noticing me. As an adult, it is more about whether I notice myself. It becomes less about presence and more about presence. Less about who shows up and more about how much of myself I have shown up for in my own life. That quiet shift explains a lot about why many of us stopped making a big deal out of our birthdays. Maybe we stopped trying to be celebrated by the world and started trying to make peace with our own path. And even in that peace, there is still an echo, a soft voice that says, "I hope someone remembers." That is the paradox of emotional growth. You can feel content and still want connection. You can feel grounded and still miss the feeling of being seen. And that is okay. That is human. Treating your birthday like an ordinary day does not mean you are numb. It means you have learned that joy does not have to be scheduled. It is something you carry quietly every day, in the small ways you keep showing up for yourself. It is the gentlest kind of celebration, invisible but real. And here's where it gets even more interesting. When someone treats their birthday like a normal day, they are not rejecting joy. They are redefining it. They are saying, I no longer need the world's permission to feel good about being alive. That shift from external celebration to internal recognition is one of the quietest signs of maturity. Because at some point, we all realize that the things that once made us feel special, gifts, parties, public posts, slowly lose their shine. What starts to matter more is alignment. Did I live this year in a way that felt honest? Did I grow? Did I show up when it mattered? For many people, a birthday becomes less about noise and more about reflection. It is not that they do not care. Their idea of celebration has simply changed. Maybe now it looks like taking a walk alone, cooking a favorite meal, or giving themselves a quiet day to think. It is not the loud happiness of balloons. It is the soft happiness of solitude. And that is something our culture often fails to understand. People often mistake quiet for emptiness, but silence can be meaningful. I have learned that stillness can hold something sacred. In psychology, there's an idea called self concordant motivation. What it really means is this: when the way you live lines up with what you value, you feel a deeper sense of satisfaction, even if nobody is clapping for you. So, when someone chooses to spend their birthday quietly, it is not because they do not care. It is because they are aligned. They are no longer chasing celebrations that are loud, temporary, or performative. They have traded that for something steadier, trust in themselves. Still, even in that calm, there is usually an emotional current moving underneath. Because the truth is, while some people are genuinely content treating their birthday like any other day, others wish they did not have to. They wish someone else would step in. They wish they did not have to act like it meant nothing. That pull between wanting to be seen and wanting to appear unaffected is one of the most human conflicts there is. I feel it too. It is the wish to be noticed without asking, the hope to be celebrated without having to request it. It lives right in the space between independence and closeness. Psychologically, this connects to something known as earned secure attachment. When people grow up with inconsistent or conditional affection, or when they experience emotional letdowns over time, they learn to rely on themselves. They become capable and self sufficient. But even the strongest people still carry a quiet hope that someone will see past the armor. That is why birthdays can turn into silent tests. Not tests you announce out loud, but ones your mind runs quietly. Who remembered without being reminded? Who reached out on their own? Who still notices me when I am not putting myself out there? And even if I tell myself it does not matter, a small part of me still checks. That is not weakness. That is being human. No matter how self aware or emotionally independent we become, we do not outgrow the need for connection. We just learn how to hide it better. There is also something interesting about how birthdays change our relationship with time. For some people, they feel like progress. For others, they feel like pressure. And the brain reacts to that pressure based on your emotional history. If the past year felt meaningful, a birthday feels like a marker of growth. But if the year was heavy or confusing, that same day can feel like a quiet confrontation, a reminder that another year has passed and the unanswered questions are still there. That is why many people choose to let the day blend into the rest of the week. It is not denial, it is self preservation. It is the mind saying, I will reflect when I am ready. Even so, the day still carries weight. It stirs memories, gratitude, regret, and nostalgia all at once. It is like your subconscious takes inventory of what has changed and what has stayed the same. And in that private accounting, something important happens. You realize that birthdays, stripped of tradition and expectation, are really checkpoints of awareness. They force you to pause and ask yourself hard questions. Am I living honestly? Am I still becoming someone I recognize? Do I respect the story I am telling with my life? When I treat my birthday like a normal day, it does not mean I'm avoiding those questions. Sometimes it means I'm facing them quietly. on my own, without an audience. Not every kind of growth needs to be shared. Some growth is invisible. It shows up in how you respond differently than you used to, in how you forgive faster, in how you complain less, in how you notice beauty in moments you once ignored. Maybe that is the truest kind of celebration. When you do not need the day to feel special because you have learned how to find meaning in ordinary life. Still, there is a gentle truth worth holding on to. Even the most independent people deserve to feel special sometimes. Not because they need approval, but because recognition feeds the parts of us that keep giving to others. The people who downplay their own birthdays are often the same ones who show up for everyone else's milestones. They remember your important dates. They check in first. They give without keeping track. They are the quiet anchors in their circles. And sometimes they forget that they deserve light too, that it is okay to let others give back, that joy does not have to be earned by being strong all year. Even calm souls need warmth. Even independent hearts need to be seen, not for what they do, but for who they are. There's nothing wrong with wanting that. There is nothing weak about missing it. If you have ever felt that soft ache on your birthday, the kind that does not demand attention but hums quietly in your chest, that is your heart reminding you that connection still matters. It is reminding you that you are human, and that is the whole point of the day. Birthdays are not about perfection or achievement, they are about existence, about the fact that you are still here, still learning, still changing, still trying to understand what it means to live. So maybe people who treat their birthday like a normal day are not indifferent at all. Maybe they are integrated. Maybe they are holding joy and reflection at the same time, accepting that not every feeling has to be loud to be real. And even so, there is room for small gestures. One message can still matter. One call, one moment of genuine presence. We often underestimate how much those small acknowledgments mean to someone who says, "It is just another day." For them, it is not about how big the celebration is. It is about sincerity, about being reminded that their quiet existence still reaches someone else, that it still matters. Deep down, none of us truly want to be invisible. We just want to be loved in a way that makes sense to us. Some people want fireworks, others want peace. Some want crowds, others want one person who truly listens. There is no single right way to experience your own life. So if your birthday feels ordinary, if you went to work, made your coffee, checked your messages, and kept going, maybe that is not something to fix. Maybe it is something to respect. Maybe what you are really saying is, my life already feels full enough that I do not need one day to prove it matters. That is not detachment, that is gratitude, just wearing a quiet coat. At the same time, allow yourself softness. If you miss the excitement you once felt, that is okay too. Missing your younger self does not mean you are moving backward. It means you remember what innocence felt like before the world taught you restraint. Maybe that is the greatest gift you can give yourself on your birthday. To remember the child who once counted down the minutes with bright eyes. The child who believed one day could hold endless magic. That child is still inside you, waiting not for a party, but for recognition. Waiting for you to say, "I see you. We made it another year." That kind of celebration does not disappear when the candles burn out. It stays with you. So if your birthday ever feels like just another day, do not feel guilty. It is not emptiness, it is growth. It is the mind learning that meaning does not need noise. And if someone remembers you in that quiet, let them. Let them say your name. Let them remind you that you matter. Because you do. Even on ordinary days, especially on those days. Maybe that is the most beautiful part of growing up. Learning that celebration does not always need confetti. Sometimes it just needs awareness, a pause, a breath. You do not have to make a wish. You already are one. A living continuation of every version of yourself that made it this far. And that is worth honoring, quietly or loudly, every single year. Don't forget subscribe, like the video, and turn on notifications.